Hey guys, it's Miss Patrick, and this is day 6 of me reading the great Gilly Hopkins. As always, I'm going to read 20 minutes, and then we'll stop for today. We're about halfway through the book. She kept looking over her shoulder at Mr. Randolph, who lay motionless with his eyes closed. Since he'd been known to sleep on Charter's couch with his eyes wide open, there was no way under heaven to tell if he were wide awake or dead asleep. But he wasn't snoring. That was worrisome. The man was blind and half deaf. Why should it matter in the least that he was sitting right there in the room while she robbed him of money he was too old to remember having? So the closer she got to sarsaparilla, the more her heart carried on like the entire percussion section of a marching band doing the Stars and Stripes Forever. At last she moved the stepladder directly in front of the place and took a step up, glancing sideways at Mr. Randolph. He didn't move. She eased up the ladder, trying not to make any noise, but it creaked and swayed under her weight. From the next to the top step, she could reach sarsaparilla to sorcery without stretching. She braced her left leg hard against the cold metal of the ladder, took out the now familiar volume and laid it gently on the ladder top. Nothing was visible except dust. She took out books on either side, dusting each one with a kind of fury. Still nothing. Mr. Randolph was shifting in his chair across the room. She looked into his blank white eyes. Oh God, maybe he could really see. Maybe it was all a trick to fool people. She froze. You certainly are doing a beautiful job. So careful. My. I don't know when the room has been so thoroughly cleaned before. I'm sort of straightening up the bookshelves. Fine. He was bobbing his head. Now, if there was just some way you could straighten up this old brain of mine as well. She was not going to panic. He couldn't see, of course. He couldn't see. It was really better that he was in the room. Nobody would suspect her of stealing right from under his nose. She dusted the space and then moved sarsaparilla down to the shelf that held the rest of the encyclopedia set. On the shelf from which it had come, she proceeded to remove, one by one, all the other books, wiping carefully behind each one to the dark-stained wood at the back of the case. With every book, her hope rose and fell, rising a little less and falling a little more each time. At last she knew that her lie to Agnes had proven all too true. There was no more money. Fear and anticipation curled in her stomach. She wanted to throw up. Mr. Randolph was chatting away happily. She couldn't seem to tune in the words, just the maddening, cheerful tone of his high-pitched voice. She wanted to throw a book at the noise, kick over the stepladder, crash a chair through the window. At the very last, scream out her frustration. But of course she didn't. Wrapped in a silent, frozen rage, she folded the stepladder and carried it to the basement. You going now, Miss Gilly? The voice followed her down and up the steps and out of the house. Thank you. Come back for another little visit, won't you? Be sure to tell Miss Trotter what a lovely help you've been. She made no attempt to answer him. It didn't matter. What he thought, he was of no use to her. 39 stinking dollars. She went straight to her room, took the brown suitcase from under the bed, and unpacked it. Then she ripped out a sheet of paper through the rings of her notebook, lay down on the bed, and pressing on her math book, wrote, Dear Courtney Ruthford Hopkins, I received your card. I am sorry to bother you with my problems, but as my real mother, I feel you have a right to know about your daughter's situation. At the present time, it is very desperate, or I would not bother you. The foster mother is a religious fanatic. Besides that, she can hardly read and write, and has a very dirty house and weird friends. She started to write colored, but erased it, not sure how Courtney might react. There is another kid here who is probably special. I am expected to do most of the work, including taking care of him, which is very hard with all my schoolwork, too. I have saved up $39 towards my ticket to California. Please send me the rest at your earliest convenience. She wrote love, then changed it to, Yours sincerely, your daughter, Galadriel Hopkins. P.S. I am very smart and can take care of myself, so I will not be a burden to you in any way. P.S. Again, I have checked the cost of a bus ticket to San Francisco. It is exactly $136.60 one way. I will get a job and pay you back as soon as possible. She listened at the top of the stairs until she heard Trotter go into the downstairs bathroom. Then she crept into the kitchen, stole an envelope and a stamp from the kitchen drawer, and ran to the corner to mail her letter before the rage could defrost and change her mind. Next chapter is called The One-Way Ticket. Not everything in the letter to Courtney had been absolutely true, but surely the part about Trotter being a religious fanatic was. She read the Bible and prayed every day, always joining Mr. Randolph's grace over the food. Besides, anyone who started for church at 9 in the morning on Sunday and didn't get home until after 12:30 had to be peculiar. Sunday mornings were torture to Gilly. The church was a strange little white frame building stuck up on the hill behind the police station. Built when the city was a country town instead of part of the metropolitan Washington sprawl. The church didn't fit in the modern world any more than the people who went there did. The children's Sunday school class, in which both Gilly and W.E. were lumped with the 5 other 6 to 12-year-olds in the church, was presided over by an ancient Miss Minnie Applegate, who reminded her 7 charges every Sunday that she had been saved by Billy Sunday. Who is Billy Sunday? He sounded like a character from the comics. Billy Sunday, meet Brenda Starr. Also, Miss Applegate neglected to say that what Billy Sunday had saved her from, a burning building, the path of a speeding locomotive, or indeed having been so luckily preserved, what good had her picking accomplished her, either herself or to the world? Old Applegate would do things like lecture them on the 10 Commandments and then steadfastly refuse to explain what adultery was. But Miss Applegate, an 8-year-old, had sensibly asked, "How can we know if we're not doing it?" Gilly, of course, knew. She whispered conversations between Sunday school and church. She offered for sale not only the definition of the word, but some juicy neighborhood examples, which had lately come to her attention thanks to Agnes Stokes. In this way, she gained 78 cents in coins previously designated for the church collection plate. The preacher was as young as the Sunday school teacher was old. He, too, was high on getting saved and other matters of eternal preservation, but his grammar was worse than Trotter's, and to Gilly's disgust he'd stumble over words of more than one syllable whenever he read the Bible. Nobody but a religious fanatic would put up with such gross ignorance for over an hour every week of their lives. Nobody but religious fanatics and the innocent victims they forced to go to church. Unlike some of the women, Trotter didn't carry on over the preacher at the church door, which made Gilly bold enough to ask her once, "How can you stand him?" It was the wrong question. Trotter sucked in her breath and glowered down at her like Moses at the Israelites. Golden calf. "Who am I," she thundered, "to pass judgment on the Lord's anointed? Would anyone but a fanatic say a thing like that?" Mr. Randolph went to the Black Baptist Church. The same taxi that took Trotter and the children to the White Baptist Church dropped him off on the way and picked him up on the way home. Gilly noted that the Black Baptists dressed fancier and smiled more than the Whites, but their services lasted even longer, and often W.E. would have to run in and get the old man out of his service while the taxi meter impatiently ticked away. It was usually past 2 by the time they got out of their Sunday clothes, cooked dinner, and finally sat down to their long, lazy meal. The Sunday after the futile dusting, Mr. Randolph surprised everyone by refusing seconds. "Oh, you must know, Miss Trotter, how it pains me to say no to this exquisite chicken, but my son is coming over about 3. In the word son, something clanked inside Gilly's chest. Suppose the son noticed that something was funny in Mr. Randolph's living room. The chair on the opposite side, the books rearranged. Suppose he knew where the money should have been. "Oh, you got time for a piece of pie now, don't you, Mr. Randolph? It's cherry today." "Cherry, my." Mr. Randolph held his bony thumb and index finger an inch apart. "About so much, all right." "I'm helpless before your cherry pies, Miss Trotter. Totally helpless." He was chewing the pie blissfully when suddenly he stopped. "Oh my, have I got any spots on my clothes? My son gets so upset." Trotter put her fork down and studied him. "You look good, Mr. Randolph. Only just a little something on your tie." "Oh, mercy, mercy. The boy is always looking for some excuse to say I can't take care of myself so he can drag me over to his big house in Virginia." He dipped his napkin into the water glass and tried to dab his tie, completely missing the offending spots. "Oh, shoot, Mr. Randolph, let me get you one of Malvin's old ties to wear. I don't know why I still got so much of his stuff around anyhow." She sniffled as if to clear away a memory of the late Mr. Trotter. Gilly, run up to my room and look in the back of the closet, will you? There's a dozen or more on a coat hanger. Before Gilly got out the door, she added, just pick a nice one here, not one of the real loud ones. She turned half apologetically to Mr. Randolph. Sometimes in those last years, if Melvin was feeling low, he'd go out and buy some wild tie and wear it every day for a week. She shook her head. I guess I should praise the Lord it wasn't some wild woman he was hanging around his neck. Mr. Randolph giggled. Why don't you bring me a wild one, Miss Gilly? I need to wake up that 50-year-old senior citizen I've got for a son. Trotter threw back her massive head and belly laughed. You're some kind of man, Mr. Randolph. Well, you're some kind of lady. Gilly fled up the stairs. These scenes between Trotter and Mr. Randolph made her insides curl. It was weird to see old people carry on, old people who weren't even the same color. But it was not that silly little flirtation that was bothering her. It was a vision of Mr. Randolph's prissy 50-year-old son poking around his father's living room. So when she saw Trotter's purse with its no-good fastener lying wide open on the bed, inviting her, practically demanding her to look in, she did so. Good God, Trotter must have just cashed her check from county welfare. Gilly did a quick count, at least 100. Another 100 would get her all the way to California, all the way to Courtney Rutherford Hopkins, all the way home. She stuffed the money in her pocket, went to the closet, and found the hanger full of Melvin's Madness. She chose the gaudiest one there, 4-inch high ballet dancers in purple tutus, their pink legs pirouetting on a greenish foreign hand. She tiptoed to her own room, slipping the fat wad of bills in her drawer under her T-shirts, and tiptoed back to Trotter's door. Once there, she slammed her feet down and noisily descended the stairs. Oh, my sweet baby, what have you done? Gilly's blood went cold. How could Trotter know? That tie, it's the worst crime Melvin ever committed. Rest his precious soul. Oh, good, good. Mr. Randolph was standing up, rubbing his wrinkled hands together in excitement. Tell me about it. You better not take this one, Mr. Randolph. It's got all these fat women jumping around. Really? The little brown face beamed. Are they decent? Yes, they're in pink flim-flams. Tutus, prompted Gilly primly, gratefully recovering from her earlier shock. What? Asked Trotter. Tutus. They're wearing tutus. Trotter roared. Ain't that perfect? Tutus. Tutu. Mr. Randolph was already taking off his spotted black tie to make room for Melvin's dancing ladies. You sure now, Mr. Randolph? I don't want your son thinking I'm some kind of wicked influence on his father. Gilly began to wonder if poor Mr. Randolph was going to choke on his own giggles. He doesn't ever need to know where the tie came from. I gave you my solemn word. This from a man hysterical with laughter. Geez. Trotter knotted the tie for him with the kind of assured expertise born of knotting one man's tie for more than a quarter of a century. She stepped back to appraise the effect. Well, what do you think, Gilly, honey? They do something for Mr. Randolph. It's okay. Okay, we gotta do better than that. How about you, William Ernest, honey? How do you like Mr. Randolph's new tie? It's beautiful, the boy whispered reverently. See, well. Trotter was immediately sober. William Ernest approves. Good, good, said Mr. Randolph, his dignity also once again intact. Would you walk with me back to my house then, son? The boy slid out of his chair and took the old man's hand. See you tomorrow here, Trotter said. Thank you, yes, thank you. And you too, Miss Gilly. See you tomorrow. Yeah, okay, said Gilly, though by this time tomorrow she figured to be in Missouri at the very least. She dried the dishes as Trotter washed them and put them to drain, her mind aboard the Greyhound bus skimming across something that looked like a three-dimensional version of the topographical map in his geography book. Trotter beside her was chuckling again over Mr. Randolph sporting Melvin's dancing ladies. His son, this big lawyer? Over in Virginia? I'd give a pretty penny to see his face when he gets a load of that tie. Mercy on us, wouldn't I ever? After they finished cleaning up in the kitchen, Trotter went into the living room and stretched out on the couch. Her one trip upstairs on Sundays was to change out of her good dress so she'd be on the couch the rest of the day, napping or laboriously reading the Sunday paper. W.E., back from next door, turned on the TV and lay down on the rug to watch an old movie. Now was the time. Gilly started for the stairs. You want to join us, honey? There's a football game on Channel 9. Lest W.E. cares about this movie. W.E. got up obediently, ready to switch channels. No, Gilly said, not right now. I got things to do. Well, okay, honey. If she was going to go, she would have to leave now. By tonight, Trotter would go upstairs and find the money gone, and nothing was sure about what might happen with Mr. Randolph's lawyer's son next door. She packed quickly, although her hands shook. The first thing was to gather all the money together and put it into her pocket. It made a lump as big as an orange. Too bad she'd thrown away that silly shoulder bag Miss Nevins had bought her last Christmas. Her jacket. First thing, next week we're going to have to buy you a good warm coat, Trotter had said. She had been waiting for the support check. Her jacket was hanging by the front door downstairs past the open living room door. Trotter was probably asleep, and if Gilly was very quiet, perhaps W.E. wouldn't hear. She crept down, keeping her suitcase under her right arm to conceal it as best she could with her body. Crossing the short, bright strip before the door, she glanced in. Neither head turned. She was safely to the front door. She took her jacket off the hook and poked it above the suitcase so that she had a free hand for the knob. Where are you going? She jumped around at W.E.'s whisper in the dark hallway. His glasses flashed. Just out, she whispered back. Oh, God, make him shut up. He did shut up and stood silently, looking first at her, then at the suitcase, then back at her. Don't go. His little face squeezed up at her like tiny boys. I got to, she said through her teeth, opening the door, pulling it shut behind her, shifting the suitcase and jacket to either hand, and running down the hill. The pulse on her forehead pounding as hard as her sneakered feet pounded the sidewalk. Once around the corner, she slowed down. Someone might notice her if they saw her running. No bus came by. There were hardly any on Sundays. She settled herself at once to walk the mile or so to the bus station, stopping to put on her thin jacket against the November wind. The bus would be heated, she reminded herself, and in California the sun always shines. It was dusk by the time she got to the bus station. She went straight to the ladies' room and combed her hair and tucked her shirt into her jeans. She tried to tell herself that she looked much older than 11. She was tall, but totally busless. She zipped up her jacket, stood up straight, and went out to the ticket counter. The man didn't even look up. I want a ticket to California, please. As soon as the words were out, she heard her mistake. California, where? He glanced up now, looking at her through half-open lids. San Francisco, California. One way or round trip. Whatever happened to Lady Cool? One way. He punched some buttons and a ticket magically emerged. $1.36 including tax. She had it. She had enough. With trembling hands, she took the wadded bills from her pocket and began to count it out. The man watched lazily. Your mother know where you are, kid? Come on, Gilly. You can't fall apart now. She pulled herself straight and directed into his sleepy eyes the look she usually reserved for teachers and principals. I'm going to see my mother. She lives in San Francisco. Okay, he said, taking her money and recounting it before he handed her the ticket. Bus leaves at 8:30. 8:30? Yeah, want to check your bag? It's only 4:30 now. That's right. That's 4 hours from now. Right again. But I want to leave as soon as I can. Look, kid, you came in here and asked me for a ticket. I gave you one on the next bus, he sighed. Okay? He said and consulted his book. You can take the 5 o'clock into Washington and catch a 6:22 out of here. He stuck out his hand. I'll have to fix you another ticket. She gave it back. It'll take me a while, he said. I gotta check the routing. He nodded as the seats across the waiting room. Just sit down over there. I'll call you. She hesitated, then reluctantly obeyed. She didn't like the idea of leaving both the money and the ticket there, but she was afraid he'd ask more questions if she protested. He was a long time at it. He was on the phone a while, talking in a muffled voice, then he was poring through his books. Once he got up and went back into the baggage room and stayed away for several minutes. It was almost 4:45. If he didn't hurry, she might miss the 5 o'clock bus. She got up and got a drink from the water cooler. The water was warm, and somebody had dropped a piece of gum on the drain. She went back to the red plastic seat, still thirsty. And that's where we're going to stop today. So as you can notice in this part that we read today, at this time, African Americans and white people went to 2 separate churches still. And she does have an African American teacher, but where she had come from before, there wasn't very many African Americans around her. And just like we learned during Black History Month in February, this was a hard transition for a lot of people, and it's way different than it is now. Now everybody can go everywhere and everyone's accepted. So this book is set in a time where that wasn't. They were just transitioning to where everyone could go to the same church and to the same school and do the different things. So you can kind of get that history by how Gilly reacts to some people. Now, it wouldn't be a reaction we have now, but during that time it was very normal to be surprised by seeing two different races in one church or in one neighborhood. But now we all live happily in the same neighborhoods, going to the same places, so we've come a long way since the setting of this book. Alright guys, so tomorrow I will read a little bit more. Thank you for tuning in. I love and miss you guys. Let me know if you need anything.